Last year, Nintendo spent $40 million on legal battles, and one of the headline cases for them was their fight against Palworld. Unfortunately for Nintendo, however, the latest update from the courtroom shows that Nintendo's legal team is kind of in big trouble. You see, when Nintendo spends millions of dollars trying to stomp out their smaller competitors instead of letting us gamers decide what the better product is, they want something very specific, and that is control. Control over not just Palworld, but over entire sections of the gaming industry. So what happened? Well, not only did Nintendo lose complete control over Palworld themselves, they're not even taking home a sizable second place trophy. Let me put it this way: in a best case scenario, if Nintendo hits an absolute grand slam, the amount of money they will walk away with from all of this is embarrassingly low considering how much they've actually spent. With that being said, however, Palworld didn't come out of this unscathed. They really did take some serious damage. So today, let's break down exactly how Nintendo just burned hundreds of thousands of dollars and 2 years of their time just to get little more than a handful of peanuts and a walk of shame. Now, this update comes from the Games Fray, which has been kind of like the #1 source for information regarding Nintendo and Pokemon versus Palworld, and a few days ago they posted this update. Ahead of October 1st court hearing, Nintendo has zero chance of prevailing over current Palworld versions. It may get up to $30,000 chump change. So that's it. That's the headline here, folks. The best case scenario is they might get $30,000 when they walk away from this lawsuit with Palworld. And later in the video, I'm going to break down exactly why this entire legal situation just completely fell apart for Nintendo. But in order to understand exactly how bad this went for them, you have to understand what Nintendo walked in the courtroom wanting. Because here's the thing that a lot of people get completely wrong about this lawsuit. This lawsuit against Palworld was never actually about money, and let me prove that to you with Nintendo's own numbers. When they first started this legal battle back in September of 2024, the damages they actually asked for were tiny. We're talking around 10 million yen total, which is roughly 66,000 US dollars. And even that was two separate requests stacked on top of each other, one from Nintendo, one from the Pokemon company, plus legal fees on top of all of that. So that is $66,000 for Nintendo and Pokemon, two of the most valuable entertainment companies on the entire planet. $66,000 is nothing. You do not lawyer up this heavy against a game like Palworld, which was the hottest game of the year that year, for a measly $66,000. That is not the whole lawsuit. Look who came to say hi. Little sleepyhead over here thinks she's getting treats today. If you guys think Tiger deserves a couple of treats, drop a like down below. And also, I want to take a moment to just thank everybody who's been using the new hype feature. It really has helped the channel a ton, so thank you, thank you, thank you. So what did Nintendo actually want here? They wanted what's called injunction. The thing that Nintendo and the Pokemon company actually asked the court for was the power to block Palworld. They wanted to basically halt its distribution, or at least to force Pocketpair to rip out the parts of the game that Nintendo claimed belonged to them. That was the real weapon here, right? I mean, Pocketpair is a tiny company compared to Nintendo, but I mean, money is something that they could afford. Considering how well Palworld actually sold, they might have been able to survive there, but an injunction can reach into your game and take out the parts that made it actually work, which effectively shuts the whole thing down. So what exactly did Nintendo claim belonged to them? Well, we've covered this on the channel before, but the entire case is built on a handful of Japanese patents. What these patents actually cover in like plain human language is this: first of all, throwing a ball to capture a creature, summoning that creature out to fight for you, and then riding or gliding on that creature and transitioning from riding to gliding and vice versa. And that's pretty much it. Nintendo tried to basically patent verbs, or at the very least, like the most basic game mechanics that we've ever seen over the last like 30-40 years in gaming, some of which they didn't even invent themselves. They copied from games before them, which is why this entire legal battle has felt comical for everybody paying attention. Everybody in the gaming scene has basically been rooting for Nintendo to fail here. They didn't try to patent a specific character or the artwork of the monsters in Palworld. They didn't even try patenting lines of code that they say were ripped from Pokemon themselves. They tried to patent basic action actions that define an entire genre of video games. And here's how scummy Nintendo is, okay? Before they ever landed on patents, they reportedly looked at a copyright case first and then quietly backed away from it sometime around late 2023 or early 2024. They knew that they just didn't have any grounds there. So what that clearly means here is that this was not Nintendo and the Pokemon Company reacting defensively. They were weighing their options to try to find any angle that they could go on the offensive and take down Palworld themselves. The real prize for them would have been precedent in the legal system. If Nintendo wins the principle that you can patent throwing a ball to catch something, then every creature collector game that ever comes out after Palworld will require at least a phone call to Nintendo for like approval, basically. So that was the actual goal. It wasn't $30,000, it wasn't $66,000, it was control over the entire genre, so Pokemon effectively had no competition. So in summary, they wanted an injunction against Palworld to stop the distribution, force them to change their game, and then they also would have loved to see the courts rule in their favor with their patents so they can control the entire genre of creature capturing. That's a high ambition, and now that we have this latest update that we're going to talk about today, the truth is that what they're going to get is super far from what they actually wanted, and that's the entire story here. But the real question is, how does a company that wanted to own an entire genre end up fighting over just pocket change? Well, here's the part that got almost no coverage, and it's the most important fact in this entire saga, and I think the reason that nobody covered it is because we're just learning about it now. But in November of 2025, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company quietly changed what they were asking for. They amended their claims so the case now only applies to old versions of Palworld, specifically the builds that existed before Pocketpair started making changes. Now, as you guys know, if you've been following the channel for a while, Palworld, as soon as they started getting the attention of Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, they just changed the game to remove a small handful of things that were in there, so that way Nintendo's entire legal argument would completely fall apart. And it actually looks like that worked entirely, because why else would Nintendo do this, right? Nintendo voluntarily walked back their own lawsuit so that it no longer touches the version of Palworld that people are actually playing right now. They are, by their own choice, suing a game that basically doesn't exist anymore, because Palworld is a live service game. Nobody's going and playing on versions that were around in 2024. Why on earth would any company do that? Well, it's like I said before, Pocketpair didn't just sit around and wait to get hit from Nintendo. They knew what they had to do. They watched the patents and they rebuilt the small parts of the game around them in real time. Back in November of 2024, they pulled the mechanic where you summoned your pals by throwing a sphere. They replaced it with the pal simply just basically appearing next to you instead. And then in a May 2025 patch, they changed how gliding works. So instead of riding a pal directly, you now use an actual glider item. And just to be clear, I'm pretty sure they only changed the gliding pals, right? So you still can fly on other pals and you can still ride on other pals. It's just the gliding one specifically to avoid the patent from Nintendo. So picture this from Nintendo's perspective, right? You file a complete BS lawsuit that is aimed at very specific mechanics, and over the course of 2 years, while the case is slowly grinding through the legal system, your target calmly reaches into the game and removes the exact things you were pointing at one by one. Every time Nintendo lined up a shot, the target just moved, and by late 2025 there was nothing left to aim at. The only Palworld that Nintendo's case can still legally touch is a Palworld that's already been patched out of existence. Their entire legal strategy was outmaneuvered by like 2 patch notes. Those maneuvers from Palworld completely collapsed what Nintendo could even collect, almost down to nothing. So then the question that I'm sure you're asking is, okay, well, why would Nintendo go in and change this legal battle themselves such that it won't actually affect the current version of Palworld? And the answer is because of the timeline. Palworld came out at the beginning of 2024 and was an absolute massive success, sold millions of copies, and it basically lit the gaming world on fire that year. So then we have to look at, when were the patents for Nintendo actually granted in Japan? And the answer is later, in 2024, after the launch of Palworld, after the explosion of popularity, and after all of the millions of sales that had already happened. So there's this small window of time time from when the patents exist at the end of 2024 through 2025, but Palworld, because the dev team is relatively small, they just patched those things out. So the window of time that's even relevant to this case is so tiny that basically Nintendo has no choice but to change what they're asking for, because otherwise the whole thing falls apart anyway. So at the very least, if they win 30,000, they could walk away saying, aha, yes, Nintendo beat Palworld. But then when you read the fine print and find out that actually they got nothing of what they asked for and only walked away with 30 grand, when you all know that they spent way more than that on their legal team, they're just shopping for the headline, even though they're functionally getting destroyed. And by the way, $30,000, 5 million yen, that is the ceiling of what they can get. It's not anything more than that. And even if it was, who cares? It's nothing. But that number assumes that Nintendo wins on absolutely everything. And if you guys have been following this channel, you know that they've actually had an uphill battle proving the patents that they do have. They're really struggling in court to like prove to everybody that yes, we invented these things. These things are organically and generally ours. And it just, the whole argument is so obviously wrong. It's so obviously garbage that even the legal system in Japan is like, what are you really? Are you serious? So again, the 30,000 is best case scenario if they win on all their patents. And by the way, the other very real outcome that is still on the table is that Nintendo walks away with literally nothing because Palworld is arguing that these patents should have never even been granted in the first place. So the 30K is best case scenario. And really, no matter how the rest of this legal battle goes, Palworld 1.0 is coming out on July 10th, right on schedule, no delays, and completely untouched. Nintendo's lawsuit can't lay a single finger on the actual official launch of Palworld, and we're less than a month away at this point. Think about how big of a total failure this is from Nintendo's legal team. The number one goal they wanted was the off switch. They wanted the ability to control or end Palworld entirely, and the game's biggest version ever, version 1.0, is going to get to have its moment completely unaffected, and the players just walk away winning here. How do we know this? Well, this is what the Game Spray has to say. The public record strongly suggests that the parties, both Pocketpair and Nintendo, have completed their written pleadings and the submission of evidence such as expert reports. The court has scheduled a presentation of evidence for October 1st and will express an opinion on November 9th, 2026. Nintendo initially targeted all Palworld versions, but in November of 2025, the plaintiffs, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, amended the scope of their claims in terms of what they are seeking from the court, not in terms of a patent claim, so that the case is now limited to older versions of Palworld. Based on the narrowed scope of the case, we cannot see any pathway to victory over any current or very recent Palworld versions, nor Palworld 1.0 for Nintendo. There would be no injunction with real world impact. So basically, sure, you can have an injunction on a version that doesn't exist anymore. Go ahead. No one cares. No one's playing that. But Palworld will continue to push forward and get better and better and better, and there's nothing Nintendo can do about it. All that is left of Nintendo's case at this stage relates to old versions of Palworld, even if, which is far from a given, Nintendo overcame all of the usual hurdles, such as defending its patents against Pocketpair's invalidity contentions, proving infringement, and ultimately proving that any damage was caused by the alleged infringement. The most it could get is 5 million Japanese yen, the equivalent of $30,000. That is chump change for either party and just a rounding error compared to Nintendo's litigation expenses. And here's the wider ramifications here, okay? Palworld 1.0 is going to launch soon, and given that Nintendo's patent assertions can't impact that release in any meaningful way, the question is whether Nintendo will recognize that patents are not the answer to competition in this space or bring additional lawsuits against Pocketpair. The fact that Nintendo is finding it increasingly hard to obtain game rule patents in key jurisdictions may dissuade Nintendo and possibly also other companies in the games industry from filing any further lawsuits of this kind. What do you guys think? I'm curious to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is Nintendo going to try again and come after Palworld version 1.0? I mean, historically, they are very litigious. I mean, again, like I said earlier, Nintendo lost 40 million on litigation between April 2025 and March of 2026. So they're not against spending money on lawsuits, even if they are going to just be blowing that money and just losing it. Completely embarrassing, by the way. But at the same time, it's like, man, I feel like they got absolutely pummeled by this. Like, they got humbled and embarrassed by Palworld, not only legally here, right? But even in the court of public opinion, I literally see 0 people trying to defend Nintendo here, which is shocking, right? Because the Nintendo fan base and the Pokemon fan base is historically one of the most brainwashed and yes men groups of all of gaming, right? Everyone knows those two groups are basically the Disney adults of gaming. They will defend anything, even to their own detriment, right? Oh, Nintendo's raising prices. Oh, well, that's a good thing because Nintendo, well, they have to raise them and it's not their fault and they're the good guys and it doesn't matter, right? You could say, oh, well, Pokemon's graphics are garbage and the games are clearly underdeveloped and shipped too early, right? Oh, well, that doesn't matter because Pokemon was never about the graphics and it's always about there's always something. My point is there's always something for these people to defend Nintendo and the Pokemon Company on, and even that camp is super quiet when it comes to this because they're objectively wrong. Nintendo is just wrong in this case. Everyone agrees. So not only are they losing legally, they lost the court of public opinion, and nobody likes companies that do this. So I hope they walk away licking their wounds. $30,000 or not, it doesn't matter. It's a net negative, not only for the legal expenses, but also from the court of the public opinion. And goodwill is not something you can just buy as a company. That's one of the first things you learn in Business 101. It takes many, many years or decades to build up goodwill with your customers, and 1 or 2 wrong moves and it all comes collapsing down. Now, to be fair, I don't think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are at risk of losing all goodwill from all their customers. Like I said, a vast majority of the fan base are just absolutely brainwashed, but this is at least one blow to that credibility. And the best part isn't that Nintendo is losing and not getting anything that they wanted here, but it's also that the flip side is gamers are winning here, right? Pocketpair and Palworld, just by refusing to fold and quietly engineering their way out of this situation, helped get the entire industry a win here by slapping Nintendo down and saying, if you want to actually beat your competition, you're not going to be able to do it from lawyers and legal systems alone. You're going to have to take the hard route and actually make a good game. And frankly, that might be one of the reasons why Winds and Waves isn't coming out till 2027, because year after year after year since probably Sword and Shield came out, if not before then, the entire internet kind of just clowns on Pokemon because there's not much to love anymore, right? I mean, even the most hardcore of hardcore fans like myself walked away after Scarlet and Violet and decided not to buy Legends EA purely on principle. But I also want to be honest here, right? I don't want to pretend like this was some clean, easy, painless victory for Palworld. This was, in fact, a real fight for them, and it did cost them. Pocketpair didn't just shrug and laugh this off. They had to mount a serious legal defense against an absolute gaming Goliath. Pocketpair's own people have admitted that this lawsuit did in fact hit them pretty hard. I mean, think about it. If you were there in 2024, you know the momentum that Palworld had. It got really popular really, really fast. And so to have Nintendo and the Pokemon Company come out of the woodworks and just put your hands around the neck of this game during its big growth period and try to suck the life out of it, it affected morale, and it did affect the development of the game, because now they can't just think about, okay, what comes next. They have to think about, okay, well, how do we change the game to not get sued to oblivion, and what's the least amount of changes we can make so that way players still enjoy playing the game. But they can't just focus on that, because they also have to focus on making new content and appeasing the player base that already gave them money, right? Like think about it. You just made the biggest game of your entire life. This is like the high point of their career, and then out of nowhere you're spending your days locked in a legal battle with Nintendo. That will take something out of a development studio. So what I'm trying to say is that there was a real cost here for Palworld, not just the money of the legal defense, but the stress that this caused them, the opportunity cost that it caused them with all of the headlines saying that they're getting attacked from Nintendo. But it's important to talk about the cost that it had and the toll that it inflicted on Palworld, because it makes what comes next so much worse for Nintendo, right? Honestly, I think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, even though they did land real punches and they genuinely made Pocketpair bleed time, money, and focus, I think they walk away even more battered themselves, and they look a lot worse, not just because of what the outcome of this case will be, but also in the court of public opinion and in the eyes of the gamers. It was David versus Goliath, and the giant is getting taken down here. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here is the number that I talked about earlier with regards to Nintendo's $40 million that they spent on litigation, right? This was posted May 8th. Games Gamespray says Nintendo lost 40 million on litigation between April 2025 and March 2026. How much of that is related to Palworld? Because remember earlier I said that they've spent millions of dollars, but a portion of that is Palworld, but how much is it actually, right? Clearly it's not all Palworld. Palworld's not, it's not that big of a game, right? The article says Nintendo's annual report doesn't disaggregate the figure for litigation purposes. One can only speculate what this number has to do with patent litigation, and in particular the Palworld dispute that appears to be going nowhere. Gamespray goes on to say that they regularly read certain companies' financial reports and they track lawsuits and settlements, and during that fiscal year Nintendo settled a litigation over former BlackBerry patents. It could be that part of the 40 million amount is attributable to the costs of settling that dispute. Presumably the patent holder, a company named Maliki, probably mispronouncing that, was seeking back royalties from Nintendo for allegedly using the patents in suit in years past. Other than that, only Nintendo's litigation with Pocketpair serves as an explanation. That one started in September of 2024, but Nintendo did not list loss on litigation for previous fiscal year April 1st 2024 to March 31st 2025. There must have been some costs in the build up to the September 2024 filing and in the 6 months following it. Nintendo did not have a line item for litigation related losses at the time, and then they actually show part of Nintendo's financial statement right here. It is possible that Nintendo did not consider its litigation related costs worth reporting in certain prior periods, but a critical mass may have been reached that necessitates disclosing the number. It is conceivable that Pocketpair's defenses required Nintendo to spend a lot of money on lawyers in order to develop a strategy for how to respond to them. Nintendo may actually generate some income from patent litigation against a third-party game controller maker after 15 years of suing, but they are not there yet, and the amount is only a fraction of Nintendo's fiscal year 2026 litigation related losses. Maybe Nintendo should be less litigious and even more profitable. And that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? I mean, you're spending 15 years, right? This is the article, 15 years suing third-party Wii controller maker Big Ben or Nakon over a patent, and Nintendo won 7 million euro in damages, which is now being appealed, by the way. This was December 2025, and there's still no end in sight for this. Okay, so they spent 15 years suing over a Wii controller, they won 7 million euros, now it's getting appealed, so they're still in court for this, and again they spent 40 million on litigation here, okay, for 7 million in payout, and that's not factoring in the 30,000 they might potentially maybe get from Palworld. Okay, and that's why I said earlier, and maybe even the title of the video, Nintendo's legal team is in trouble, and it's not because Nintendo themselves are suing, it's because their legal team is unprofitable and it is not getting them the outcomes that they want as of late. And that's exactly what all of us should want if we are gamers. Okay, and look, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no reason for Nintendo to ever sue anybody. Okay, surely there are some reasons why you might want to take down an emulation site or something like that if they're distributing things that are illegal, copyrighted material, whatever the case might be, right? Just to be clear, emulation is not illegal as long as you obtain the ROMs legally from copies that you actually own. At least that's my understanding of it. I'm not a legal professional and nothing in this video is legal advice, but again, I can understand some instances, right? I mean, like, of course there have to be some small instances where we want to see a gaming company take down somebody that's hurting the industry, sure, right? But as you guys know, right, Nintendo wields their legal hammer like it's nothing, and here we can see that it has real costs, and maybe moving forward Nintendo is going to think twice before spending 40 million dollars and has nothing to show for it. The victory here being appealed and the loss against Palworld, I mean, okay, fine, they might get 30k and call it a win, they'll get the headline. Okay, you spend 40 million on a headline that has an asterisk on it, and everybody in the gaming community knows the truth because people like me are going to make videos about it, right? Nintendo can claim they won if they get 30k, but we know they actually lost. They're not getting what they wanted. They wanted control, they wanted injunction, and they're not getting that. So in the end, this is not just a huge win for Palworld, Pocketpair, and the fans of their games. It's a huge win for gamers because it's showing Nintendo that if you want to actually beat competition, unfortunately you're gonna have to start making good games again. Hopefully they haven't forgotten how, because when it comes comes to games like Pokemon, it's kind of been a while. And look, I know Pokopia is well reviewed, people love it, I've played it. That's not a Pokemon game, okay? It's obviously a spin-off. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. It was only partially developed by the Pokemon Company anyway. Koei Tecmo did all the heavy lifting there, right, with Dragon Quest Builders and knowing the genre and getting things right. Either way, my point is this is a win for gamers, not only because Nintendo takes the L here, but also because they might rethink their legal strategy moving forward. And then on top of that, the silver lining might be that maybe we start to get real effort put in from the Pokemon Company, and maybe, I know this is hopium or copium, okay, but maybe, possibly, somehow, if the stars align and we get an absolute miracle, maybe we'll see an actual good Pokemon game at some point in the next decade, possibly, maybe. And that's a big maybe because they haven't done it in a decade, but hey, there's a small sliver of me that's really, oh, I really hope they can get back to making good games, because I got a shelf full of Pokemon stuff. I love the franchise and I want a new good Pokemon game. That's all I want. Anyway, guys, if you made it to the end of this video, make sure you drop a thumbs up down below. It really helps small channels like mine a ton. And you might think you're subscribed because you've seen a bunch of my videos, but you're actually not. Sometimes YouTube literally just unsubscribes you. So double check down below.